Assalamualaikum. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Eid Mubarak to all of you. Ma'al Zahir Batin. Alhamdulillah. We are continuing with our lessons. Let's start off with intentions for seeking knowledge and teaching. I intend to seek knowledge and to teach, to benefit myself and to benefit others, to remind myself and to remind others, to profit myself and to profit others, to urge adherence to the book of Allah and the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to invite to guidance and to guide to that which is good, seeking the face of Allah, His pleasure, His gifts, and His rewards. Subhanahu. All right, let's continue on with our Fatiha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Let's continue with our dua. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma rzuqna ya Rabbi fahman nabiyyin wa hifdal mursalin wa ilhamal malaikatil muqarrabin. في عافيتي يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين وفقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل واهدنا إلى سواء السبيل. اللهم انفعنا وارفعنا وعرفنا بالعلم النافع وانفعنا به أنفسنا وأهلنا وأوطاننا وديارنا وجميع المسلمين يا إله العالمين. الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. Alhamdulillah, today is the last day of April. Okay, we continue on with our legacy, saviors of Islamic spirit. We are still with Ibn Taimiyah, Hafiz Ibn Taimiyah. All right, all right, we continue on with Ibn Taimiyah, long way to go. All right, Annie, let's hope everybody is okay with Ibn Taimiyah. Critique of dialectics, the criticism of Ibn Taimiyah, the learnings that we gain here is to understand where people actually go wrong. And we saw a number of them who are very, we don't, I mean, for myself also, I used to read Ibn Sina not knowing that he was an ardent supporter of Aristotle. So that is why when we move into various literatures, Islamic literatures and scholars, not all scholars might be following the true path. So always be with those who are aware of their madhabs and such, and their ways of thinking in the right way of doing things. All right, so Ibn Taimiyah here has highlighted to us a number of things which are of concerns concerning the philosophers. In the last lesson, we had his concerns on their concept of prophethood. Somehow they do not have that concrete belief that the prophets actually received message from an angel. It's because of Aristotelian belief, non-belief of the spiritual world or the unseen world. Right, it all has to be tangible and material. All right, so the criticisms of Ibn Taimiyah was not limited to philosophy and its camp followers alone. He did not spare even those dialecticians who endeavored to defend Islam, but employed the philosophical doctrines and concepts and its terminology and syllogism to establish the facts of unseen and unknowable reality. So now we move on to the dialectics. And the dialectics are a group of people, right, who also use philosophy. That means they do use their thinking ability, which we are aware is not, we can't perceive everything with our mind and our intellect and our ways of trying to understand things, right? So although these people tried to defend Islam, but somehow the tools that are used to defend Islam can cause them to be out of the fold of Islam because of the use of certain philosophical doctrines which are questionable, and concepts and its terminology. Syllogism is a way of coming to a conclusion, to conclude about something, all right, that by way of two different theories or two different ideas. For example, we say dogs are animals, right? So we say, and all animals have got four legs. This is an example. Mammals have got four legs. So dogs are mammals. So we come to that conclusion by these two opinions which are put forth, or these two ideas, which are true ideas, which are put forth. So we can't do that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the knowing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the knowing of the jinns, because you cannot see for sure what the jinns are, what the angels are. So it doesn't work in that sense. All right. So they try to do all these things to establish the unseen. So as they are they are different from the philosophers who were the followers of those who were followers of Aristotle. We were aware by the discussion that we were having that some of the philosophers actually did believe in the unseen, like Socrates, because they had interaction with people who were given divine knowledge. That means those people who had prophets in their midst, right? That means people like these people had traveled to Syria, where there were prophets, the Eastern, the Middle Eastern area where prophets are there. So what we saw was that Aristotle was like 250 before Isa alayhi salam. So there were prophets already then, right? We know the prophet started from Adam alayhi salam. Anyway, so ideas were abound around the area, and some of the philosophers actually come to accept this idea of the unseen. But here we have the Muslims. The Muslims believe in the unseen. It's one of our main criteria of people of taqwa, is that we believe in the unseen. That is already spelled out very early in the Quran. Say, so Alif Lam Mim, second paragraph, Alif Lam, second surah, Alif Lam Mim, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب. Those who believe in the ghaib. So the ghaib includes Allah, includes the Arash, includes the seven skies, includes the heaven and hell. All these are the ghaib. Right? So these Muslims were trying to explain the unseen and the unknowable reality by employing philosophical doctrines and concepts, terminologies, and syllogism. But the philosophical terms tended to impart a limited and incorrect exposition to the transcendental realities owing to their association with the philosophical traditions and precepts. So the terms, as mentioned, it's not possible, it's not really viable, right, to explain the unseen and the unknowable reality by using philosophy, because the terms in philosophy, the philosophical terms are limited, right, and also it is some of them are incorrect in trying to explain the realities of the unseen, right, because of their association with philosophical traditions and precepts. Speaking of the dialecticians, he says in the An-Nabuwat, writings of these dialecticians affirming creation, resurrection, hereafter, and the existence of the creator are neither rationally persuasive nor canonically reassuring, And this has been acknowledged by the dialecticians as well. So you see that they are Muslims. So somehow they want to try to explain resurrection. They want to try to explain creation. It means the creation of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. They want to try to explain hereafter, right? And existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that matter. But they are not able, they are not rational enough. They're not rationally, because if you want to use rational, then you cannot persuade them to think or to understand what is non-existent and non-material, non-tangible. So it's rationally just not persuasive. And by ruling also, it's not reassuring, because canonical means by using the laws of Islam and things like that. So they can't do that because they are not using that, because they try to use philosophical concepts to explain. And they themselves are well aware of it, the dialecticians. Imam Razi openly confessed when he had grown old, that after pondering over the scholastic and philosophical subtleties, he had reached the conclusion that these could neither quench one's thirst nor cure the sick. Right. So Imam Razi at one time also, was inclined to some of these ideas, but as you grow older and more matured, and as you experience lots of other ideas and concepts, and your faith in God changed for the better. So he come to realize that there is they can't. He was pondering over the scholastic and philosophical subtleties. He had reached the conclusion that these could neither quench one's thirst nor cure the sick. So it is not able to explain really what people need to know, and it does not have the ability to cure sick. Sick could be anybody who are disturbed by all kinds of ideas and concepts that they find difficult to consolidate with. The reasoning of the Quran, he admitted, was the most convincing. Look at the Quranic verses. Nothing is as his likeness, or they cannot compass it in knowledge, emphasizing negation of similitude to Allah, or those affirming his attributes, such as, they cannot encompass it in knowledge. Stop. So that's another set here. Sorry, it's quite difficult to see this. But this is another idea here, right? Emphasizing negation of similitudes to Allah, or those affirming his attributes, such as. All right, let's just look again a little bit through here. In some time. So he's saying that reasoning of the Quran is the best and the most convincing. Quran says nothing is like his likeness. So you cannot try to figure out how Allah looks like, that you cannot put shape to Allah, you cannot put position to Allah, you can't do anything, because nothing, the Quran has said it, that's it, nothing is his likeness, you cannot imagine, because there's nothing. Because anything that you use of the world, right, would be a resemblance, so such as resemblance. They cannot compass it in knowledge, and they cannot ever, whatever knowledge they have, they cannot understand everything with their knowledge, because it is beyond the knowledge of mankind. Emphasizing negation of similitudes to Allah, or those affirming his attributes. Right. So these two verses emphasize that there's none is similar to Allah. None can understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. None can be able to comprehend what the very realities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says those affirming his attributes, such as, or emphasizing negation of similitudes to Allah, or those affirming his attributes, such as he mounted the throne. Now that is istawa al-arsh. So quite a number of times we have this verse in the Quran where Allah, the word istawa in itself is being argued by many, being given different meanings and different understandings by various scholars. So if you put mounted on the throne, it's as if he's sat on the throne, and there's no such thing as that, right? Because he doesn't have shape. We cannot attribute shape to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot attribute figure to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is just without any likeness. Unto him good words are said, or who is in the heaven, and you will arrive at the same conclusion as reached by Al-Ghazi. So these are the words of the Quran that Al-Ghazi says, when he say, unto him good words ascend, right? We always tend to think that Allah is up there, even in Hindustani language, it says Upparwala. Upparwala means the one who's on top, right? And we cannot say that Allah is in the sky. We can't say that also. Then we are putting Allah in a place which we do not, because we are not aware. It is just beyond us to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what it is. All right. And who is in the heaven? So where is the heaven? Right. This is our terms, words used in the Quran, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned and explained to us in Surah Al-Imran. That is our called verses which are called mutashabihat. Mutashabihat means the verses exist and it somehow describes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's position and situations and things like that. However, they are called mutashabihat, means they just are forms of resemblance. Because as a human being, our understanding capacity is limited, and the words that we use to explain things are what we understand and we can comprehend. So for Allah to explain himself, he needs to use words which we are familiar with, or else we will not understand anything, right? So these are just to make us have an indication of that he is powerful, he is above the throne, and where is the throne nobody knows, right? It's in the heavens. So it's wrong to tell children, oh, Allah is in the sky. No. This is why Rasulullah also wanted to, I'm not sure whether it's a reason or not, but we are aware that Rasulullah, there are some people actually when they pray in the initial stages of Islam, initial years of Islam, when they pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they pray, they do their salat, they actually look up because thinking that Allah is up in the sky. And Rasulullah scolded them and told them and advised them to look at the ground with a sense of humility, being in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so Al-Ghazi concluded that there's no way the scholars, the dialecticians and the philosophers can explain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well as the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reminded us, right, with references to the two different types of verses, what they call it, ayat, verses of ayat of they call it mutashabihat and muhakamat. That means those are confirmed to be clear enough for us to understand, right? The verses of stories in the Quran is clear verses for us to understand. And he reminds us to always recite in the Quran. Just after mentioning that in the Quran there are these two different types of verses, and he says those who dwell on the mutashabihat, that is trying to figure out Allah and this and that, they can go astray because nobody can actually encompass and understand them through the very, very realities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We only understand the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so we are reminded to say, Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaytana wa hab lana min ladunka rahma innaka antal wahhab. It's a beautiful explanation there. Rabbana, do not swerve our hearts. So these are the things that can cause people to actually leave Islam because of the confusion they have, trying to explain deeper about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we say, Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana, or do not divert our hearts. La tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaytana, after you have guided it, ba'da idh hadaytana, after you have guided us, wa hab lana min ladunka rahmah, and we seek you to bestow on us your mercy. Innaka antal wahhab, for surely you are the one who bestows on the one who bestows, right? So that's Al-Ghazali and Ibn Aqil have also drawn similar inferences, for indeed this is an incontrovertible truth, right? The Quran cannot be objected. The Quran cannot be put aside for ideas other than the Quran. So they come to the conclusion that only the Quran. We know that Al-Ghazali also was influenced by dialecticians, by philosophers, and we have also Ash'ari also being a Mu'tazilite, having such ideas in the earlier years of their lives. And then they realized that they were in the wrong, and they moved back to the path of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Another passage of the same book, Ibn Taimiyah, highlights the mistake committed by the dialecticians. They followed neither the path of the rationalists nor followed the teachings of the prophets, with the result that, on the one hand, they deviated from the ingenious nature, and on the other hand, were also deprived of the conviction imparted by the Sharia. So they are rather confused lot, right? Because they are not able to embrace the whole of the teachings of Rasulullah. They try to explain certain teachings of Rasulullah, explain the Quran by using rational ideas. So, and at the same time, they are not very rational also, because they try to explain the unseen, because there is no way we can explain the unseen using rational arguments. All right, so they are just confused. Their rationalization led them only to uncertainty and unnecessary quibbling and hair splitting of imaginary issues. So they end up quarreling and arguing, and because they just don't know and they can't see things which are imaginary, and they just imagine and they start thinking and they start finding ways and means to explain things which become eventually is not possible. Another weakness of the scholastics towards which Ibn Taymiyah invited attention was that when they deliberate upon prophethood, they raise weighty objections, but their defense is normally weak and unassuring. So as mentioned, they saw prophethood, the philosophers saw prophethood as a kind of dream, as, a man having special abilities and things like that. Not so much that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with certain attributes or characteristics, right, which are defined for prophets, right? And the ideas are normally weak, the defenses are weak and unassuring, although they raise objections concerning certain aspects of the prophet's life. Like, for example, people who would not want to believe that that there is that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that there was a group, 70 of the elders of the Bani Israel, right, who followed Nabi Musa alayhi salam, and they arrogantly asked to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah caused them to die, and then later on he revived them back again. Some people find this difficult to believe, that the dead will come to life immediately like that, right? So they try to find other explanations. You can see this kind of explanations if you go through the tafsir of Muhammad Asad. I'm not sure what is the inclination of Muhammad Asad, but going through his tafsir, he does not really subscribe to the various miracles that happen with the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. Example was that he was there was a story in the Surah Al-Baqarah where the Jews, when there was a man who was killed, and they wanted to know who killed him, and Nabi Musa was there at that time, and Nabi Musa told them to slaughter a cow, and they were very upset, and they started being funny, asking all kinds of questions about the cow. Anyway, they took the tail after they managed to slaughter the cow that was described by Musa alayhi salam. They took the tail. He took the tail of the cow and he hit the dead body, right, which was in question, and the dead body actually raised, came back to life, and told who was his murderer, which happened to be his cousin. And this was not, Asad tend to say this is allegorical, which means this is like not literal. It has a different meaning to it, that the band did not really come back to life. So because it's very difficult to explain such things rationally. We've already given many examples of their baseless reasoning. Whoever studies their writings to find credence and conviction, holding them up as the defenders and mouthpieces of Islam, capable of proving the existence of prophethood on rational grounds, he is unable to get a satisfactory reply in their books. So if you try to go through their books to find a good, a rational explanation of who these prophets were, no way, you can't find it, because you can't do it rationally. Right? Like, for example, in the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam traveling from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, I mean, did they find him crazy? How can you do that? It would take 2 months to go there, and you can go there just overnight, right? And as when they approached Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he says, if I can believe an angel visit him, I can believe anything from him. So that's called belief. You can't, it's not rational thinking. All right, so he becomes a victim of skepticism and mental perplexity, which bar his way to faith and certitude of knowledge. So that is the reality of trying to dwell into being rational thinking, logical thinking, and whatever, right? You become skeptics, and then you become confused, and then you don't have much faith, right? And there'll be blockages towards faith because can't have that kind of conviction and certitude, yaqeen of the knowledge. The doors of doubt, unbelief, and ignorance are thus open for those whose knowledge is limited to the writings of the dialecticians. A common weakness of philosophers and dialecticians. If in Ibn Taymiyah's opinion, both the philosophers as well as the dialecticians had committed a common mistake. Since, despite their differences, the mode of their reasoning was the same. Both of them are using their intellect to explain, right? Whether it's syllogism, which is having two ideas, and then from two ideas you come to a conclusion, right? Their fundamental weakness or mistake was that they tried to achieve that with the help of reason, which could never be had through it. You can never understand certain things just by reason. As mentioned, it's not mirage. You can understand that. The tree walking towards Rasulullah, how to reason that out, right? Maybe the plants do not move; they just stay in their place. They are rooted, right? And yeah, water coming out of the Prophet's fingers, a bowl of milk can quench the hunger of 40 people. How do I explain all those things? No way. In the process, they arrayed themselves against natural human disposition as well as the guidance provided by the prophets. Therefore, observes Ibn Taymiyah, the findings of both these groups have many mistakes, but little benefit to all. So do not dwell, what he's trying to say, so don't dwell in these fields of dialecticians, really rational thinking and philosophical thinking, because they cannot come to any proper, real conclusion for the fact that the human mind is limited. Right? They array themselves against natural human disposition as well as the guidance. So against natural human disposition, human beings has the capacity, the thinking capacity of the human being is limited. And the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, of course, involved a number of imaginary, invisible concepts, right, which we have to understand and believe. The mode of reasoning employed by the philosophers and scholastics was, according to Ibn Taymiyah, extravagantly formal and elaborate, with the result that they had to adopt a lengthy and roundabout method for establishing these facts, which could have been proved easily by taking to a simpler but unsophisticated course, more appealing to human intellect. So somehow, to be seen as, very scholarly, to be seen as having strong academic abilities, right? They use lots of example. They go and dwell into things they become very lengthy. They try to explain. Sometimes, when we listen to those people who are so academically inclined, it's so difficult for the layperson, right? So people just don't understand. They themselves get confused along the way, right? And it's best to explain it in simple terms, which is appealing to the human intellect, just as the way the Quran does it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how to appeal to his slaves. He disagreed with the dialecticians that the logical syllogism was the only satisfactory method of reasoning to be applied by them. So as mentioned, they would have two ideas, and because of this a man is hungry, a man drinks. Sorry, a man is thirsty and he drinks. So when a man is thirsty, he must drink. So that kind of ideas. You do not, but basically whatever you come up with is what the mind can perceive. So there's no way. And just because you have two ideas, you come to a conclusion from the two ideas, that doesn't mean it is right all the time. So that was how they actually come to their conclusions. He argued that even if the premises of their reasoning were sometimes correct, which means that at most of the time the premises of their reasoning are not correct, they were not fundamental, because experience and study of human nature shows that Allah has made it easy for men to understand what is essential for him to learn. All right, so they were not able to reach out to people because Allah has made it easy for people to understand. What is necessary for us to know Him is all in the Quran. And how it is presented by Allah is to be understood by the hadith of Rasulullah and the teachings of the Sahabas of Rasulullah. For that very reason, there are ample signs, indications, and evidences of the existence and oneness of the Creator and the prophethood of His apostles, and so are the means to attain the knowledge about them. Right? So Allah has given us ample signs to know that Allah exists, right? And there's only one God. In the Quran, Allah refers to many ways, varied ways to show people that there is existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no way you can doubt the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're looking around yourself, look at the various things that Allah has created. And the prophets. And the prophets, Allah gives stories of many of the prophets and how those who don't listen to the prophets are punished. So that is the way to attain the knowledge about them, is through the divine messages. There were, however, certain persons, said Ibn Taimiyah, who had a flair for logical syllogism and argumentation, but for those it was quite unnecessary. For others, it was quite unnecessary. For most people, the arguments are just not necessary because it's easy enough. Allah has made it easy enough for us to realize that there is a creator and that He has sent prophets. He has prophets who would pass His message. Of course, this kind of logical syllogism, some people might take to it, but not everybody. And it's not necessary also, so you say, the Quranic reasoning. Ibn Taimiyah strongly pleaded that the Quranic reasoning was not only most appropriate, but also most convincing for the affirmation of metaphysical and unseen realities and religious truths. It's a reality of the Quran. If you read the Quran, we learn the Quran, we know that there is enough proof in the Quran, right, to tell us, right, about the unseen realities and religious truths. The arguments put forth by the Quran, writes Ibn Taimiyah, are much more assuring and carry a deeper sense than the propositions of the philosophers and dialecticians. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reaches out to us through the Quran, and He presents various concepts in various ways, and it is not difficult for most people to understand. At the same time, the former do not suffer from fallacious reasoning, which is a common feature of logical disputations. So the Quran, there's nothing wrong. There's no mistakes in the Quran. There's no fallacy in the Quran. There's no imaginations in the Quran. Everything is true from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unlike the dialecticians and the philosophers who try to think out of the box, but somehow they are confined with the abilities of human beings, and they cannot go further than that. Another place he says, knowledge of the reason advanced by the Quran, as well as the self-evident marks and signs adduced in support of the existence of Allah, His sustentation of the world, His oneness, His knowledge and power, and the possibility of resurrection and retribution in the hereafter is essential for acquiring the noblest human qualities. What is saying here? Right? Knowledge of the reasons advanced by the Quran. So we need to learn the Quran. We gain knowledge of the Quran. And in the Quran in itself, there are knowledge of the reasons. That means the Quran put forth reasons behind Allah doing things. And self-evident marks and signs. So there are clear signs and marks that adduced in support of the existence of Allah. So by going through the signs and these marks, we can come to the conclusion that Allah exists, that He sustains the whole of the world. He is one. His knowledge and power is immense. None can compete with His knowledge and power. And there is resurrection and attribution and hereafter. But these are essential for acquiring the noblest human qualities. That means by studying this, right, human being will acquire the noblest qualities. I mean, knowing that there is hereafter, knowing that we'll be questioned concerning our question concerning our actions on earth, right? We would be very much more careful in the way we behave. In support of his contention, he cites the example of the different forms of reasoning employed in support of the existence of divine being and his attributes, which also bring out the differences between the philosophical and Quranic concepts of God. Right. So to support him, he gives examples of the various reasonings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put forth to prove his existence. And by doing so, he showed that the philosophers are not able to prove the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran is elaborate, where it affirms divine attributes, but makes only a compendious reference when the negation is stressed. Right? Actually, there's only two. We've seen that. Nothing is like as his likeness. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. None is like him. Right? He is just unlike anyone. This being also the way of the prophets to explicate in detail what he is and are concise in describing what he is not. So in explaining Allah, the Quran goes into various directions, various ways, various understandings and everything, various explanation to understand who Allah is. But the negation of his attribute, very concise. Very few verses, I said only 2 verses to say that none is similar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the prophets also likewise are very concise in denying the various attributes, right? Certain attributes which are not applicable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the other hand, their rivals and opponents, the Greek philosophers, may pay more attention to the denial of his attributes, but make only a passing reference when they have to confirm them. So you can see the difference, right? The Quran is very intensive in explaining who Allah is. This is cursory remark on that effect. None can be the same as he is. Whereas the Greek philosophers try to disprove, find various attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the denial of his attributes make it, but where his attributes are concerned, right, it is just a passing remark. This is a passing reference to them, not even looking into the depths of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The writings of the Greek philosophers and their votaries avouch the point made out by Ibn Taimiyah. So that Ibn Taimiyah has proven the truth of what he says, right? When people ponder over the writings of the philosophers. In fact, the pains taken by the philosophers to deny the positive attributes of Allah have reduced his being to an imaginary and impotent entity. So they have been trying their very best to deny Allah's attributes and to prove that Allah, so to deny his attributes and hardly able to explain who Allah is, right? And so they end up they're not being able to know who Allah is, right? And Allah is just an imagination and without any much power, because they have denounced all these abilities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is Allah? What knowledge and power he possesses? There are not more than a few words or few philosophical terms to be found in the entire world. So they can't explain who Allah is because they're trying to use rational thinking. No way they can explain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the way Allah puts forth, right, his attributes, we understand, we know Allah, we appreciate Allah by his attributes, and that is where the Quran is. The Quran explains the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in detail, right? But I mean, in the ways that human beings can comprehend and understand, but the philosophers are not able to do that. And as a result of it, all those who had been inspired by that philosophy in Greece and outside it have never developed any conscious relationship with Allah, expressing itself in their intellectual ideals and moral aspirations, or a felt longing for his proximity. So that is the reason, because they are so dry, they are so detached from the realities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those who have embraced these ideas, these Greek philosophical ideas, that they can't develop a relationship, a conscious relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unlike Muslims, believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has, who appreciate Allah, who knows Allah, who loves Allah in our prayer, in our salat. We have this connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have this love, longing to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be among the favorite ones of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, the Quran has helped us, right, to foster that beautiful relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This has been so because a waking consciousness of Allah can be created only through His names. You want to be conscious of Allah, you want to love Allah, you want to appreciate Allah, you want to be grateful to Allah. It's only through His names, attributes, and manifestations indicating positive characteristics, but the philosophy insists on the negation of His qualities. So that is why they cannot get to Allah. They do not experience Allah. I mean, for us, what is the meaning of experience or knowing that Allah is there? Knowing that Allah is there for us, Allah will be helping us. Allah has all the powers and the abilities, right, for us to relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The history of man's intellectual development bears witness to the fact that man has never been enamored of anyone about whose person and character he has no knowledge. So he's saying that looking at the man's intellectual history, right? Man cannot respect, cannot be in awe of anyone whom they don't know. They need to know that particular person and the realities of that person before he can be in awe of that particular person, right? So what more? That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing the intellectual capacities of men, right, has given us this Quran, which allows us, right, to appreciate His attributes, allow us to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He brings it in and on and on and on us, that we eventually love Allah and we have great dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we leave our affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every human affection going out to some other person or object, whether it is love or fear, hope or disappointment, is directed only to known persons or characteristics, while philosophy insists on the denial of divine attributes. So here we can see the explanation is really powerful, very strong. You want to love someone, you need to know someone. You are fearful of someone, you need to know the characteristics of that person that causes you to be fearful. You want to have hope in someone, you need to know that that person can be there for you. And if you're disappointed with someone, you need to know what causes the disappointment, right? So you need to know the person before you can have a kind of affection for that person. Of course, here we are referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the philosophers are going to deny the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's no way they can have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The historians of religion and morals are unanimous that the ancient Greeks were not known for their devotion to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or religious genius. The religious experience had in fact no depth and substance worth the name. So they do not have that kind of great relationships that people have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Muslims have been seen to be among the great scholars, right? Only those who the ulama are the one who knows Allah, because knowing, need to learn before you can really appreciate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not and desire to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our zikrs and our Quranic readings and our prayers. And alhamdulillah, we just passed by Ramadan. Muslims who are doing their tahajjuds, doing their tarawih, all these are dedications to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, strong belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the words of Ibn Taimiyah, this was because 100,000 negations could never be equal to a single affirmation. So negations doesn't help in any way. No religious structure can, in fact, be built on the foundations of denial alone. So there is no such thing as a religion. The philosophers are not people of religion because they are negating the characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why Greek philosophy in the West and Buddhism in the East failed to reconstruct a society whose cornerstone was a heartfelt sentience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are not able to create that relationship, that love, that awe, that reverence of Allah subhanahu of God, for that matter. Right? In fact, Buddhism, as they say, is not a religion, but a philosophy. So now you understand the meaning of philosophy, the difference in philosophy and religion. Religion is a way of life formulated by, brought forth by the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which brings you to God. Right? If you don't have God, then you don't have religion. Both these succumb to idolatry and atheism because the inherent human propensities of faith and conviction, devotion and love can never be satisfied by any epistemology involving intellectual wrangling and forgeries of the brain. So Greek philosophy and Buddhism, these are some, of course, Buddhism ends up many ways into idolatry. And Greek philosophies, they have no God, so they are atheists. And they succumb to this because the inherent human propensities of faith and in conviction, devotion and love can never be satisfied by any epistemology involving intellectual wrangling and forgeries of the brain. He's saying that the human being, there is a tendency in the human being to have faith and conviction. It's what they call fitrah. And Rasulullah has said, every soul, every child is born on a set of fitrah. A set of fitrah means an inclination to be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have faith and conviction, to devote yourself to Allah, to have love for Allah. And this cannot be satisfied by any form of intellectual discussions, and forgeries of the brain would be imaginations of the brain, thinking of things which they are not able to encompass. Disconcerting influence of Greek logic. In order to demonstrate the fallacious basis of logic purely on rational grounds, Ibn Taimiyah subjected its premises to a close scrutiny in the same way as he had critically examined its counterpart, the philosophy. All right, so logic, so you can look here, fallacious basis of logic purely on rational grounds. We cannot be logical only on rational grounds, right? But there is logic. If you all are interested in what is the meaning of logic, to think and to understand things, in a systematic manner, to come to conclusions, when Hamza Yusuf has a series of lectures on logic. Logic is important in Islam, right? But logic with the teachings of Rasulullah. So it's not only your thinking, your mind, and you say, oh, Islam is a very logical religion. Some people say, how can you say it's logical, right? What is resurrection? What's the logic of resurrection? Explain to me. What's the logic of angels, not disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is the logic of angels being created from light? Explain to me. So we can't be logical in everything, right? Where is the logic of the Prophet going to the seven skies? Right, so there must be an element of belief, right, in the unseen. The Greek logic had, so you're talking about the Greek logic, so logic is not wrong. You must know how to go through logic. As mentioned, you can listen to Hamza Yusuf. The Greek logic had, in fact, captured the heart of the Arabs even more powerfully than the philosophy of the Greeks. According to Sa'id Qartabi, the writings of the Greek philosophers on logic were being zealously studied by the Arabs as early as the 3rd century of Islamic era. So this is a very sad state of in the Muslim world, where they actually are in awe of the logical reasonings of the Greeks, and they spend time, actually, lots of time to learn Greek logic rather than the true teachings of Rasulullah. By the beginning of the 5th century, these had been accorded such a pride of place in the Arab curriculum that even Al-Ghazali was carried away by it. Yes, initial. We must always remember when we refer to various personalities, especially Muslim personalities here in Al-Ghazali. Yes, initially he was involved with it. He learned about it, right? That is because of the curriculum that he went through. So for us also, we have a certain curriculum in our schools and everything, and we learn things which might not be actually in line with our Islamic beliefs. For example, if we remember when we were young, all of you might remember this. I mean, being a physics teacher, I always teach this, and now I said, wow, I had done something sinful. In fact, right, as our teachers would teach us, energy is neither created nor destroyed. There's no such thing as nothing is created, because everything is created by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and can be destroyed, right? And along the ways, you can see that the physicians had through the experiments, they actually are confounded by ideas of particulate nature of energy, right? Energy is not supposed to be material, and that energy can have some kind of a particulate nature. If we talk about energy being particles, then the energy can be material. I mean, that stands. So there were a lot of other discoveries later on which confound some of the physicists. So Allah knows. What I'm saying is that we have said things which are not right as Muslims, to say that the energy is neither created nor destroyed. But that's what we learn in school, right? And we take it as that. And so it is not about, saying, some people will just take a life of Al-Ghazali, Imam Ghazali, where he was involved with philosophy, and use that to justify their interest in philosophy. But you should look later on, when he learns more and he understands things better, differently, when he went to search for the truth, that he had a book to disprove the disprove philosophy, right? Very interesting book, actually. Very small book he actually wrote, right? Although some scholars still maintain that his book has some traces of philosophical idea. Allah. All right, he considered logic to be the basic discipline of all sciences. That is the origin, what Imam Ghazali used to say, to think. In the introduction of his well-known book, Al-Mustafa, he remarks that logic constitutes the fundamental discipline in every branch of knowledge. Anybody who is not well-versed in this science can never be sure of the knowledge gained by him. Now, here again, we need to see where he's coming from, because as mentioned, logic is necessary, but what kind of logic is important, right? So we don't know where he's talking, which form of logic. So to just put him as saying this logic that he's referring to is the logic of the Greek, and so he might be influenced by the Greek ideas, might not be so right. Logic, we need certain amount of logic to understand certain things. In Maqasid al-Falasifa, in that means the maqasid is a maqsud, and maqsud is the intention or the reason behind philosophers. So far as the logical premises and its a priori principles are concerned, most of them are undoubtedly tested and true. So there are some of them, most of them, right? But what are these logical premises? It has to be expanded on, it has to be explained, right? And for us to just take it and say, oh, he is into logic, into Greek logic, we might make mistakes, because later on he has changed his position. Only seldom is there any mistake in them. Whatever differences the doctors of faith have with Greek masters of logic, these relate to terminology used by the two without any divergence of opinion in regard to its aims and objectives. All right, the doctors of faith will be the scholars of Islam, right? They have differences, but according to them, the differences is only in terminology, but their aims and objectives are the same. You need to understand that further. All are agreed that the science is meant to reach conclusions by connected thoughts. So they agree that by using logic, you need to connect ideas, right, and then come to a conclusion from the connections of ideas. But of course, we can have ideas which are, there are logics in which we use concepts that are brought by the prophets. But these are also ideas, but whether these ideas are tangible or not, that is another thing altogether. Ibn Rushdi, who held Aristotle in the highest esteem, considered logic to be the worthiest knowledge attainable by human beings and the measured rod of one's excellence. So he of course is with the Greek logic. And this is his. We don't know whether in later years he have changed his ideas of logic or not. Allah knows best his state, right? But as of now, as of what we understand of him, he is very much in awe of Aristotelian ideas. So he's saying that it's worthiest knowledge attainable by the human beings and the measuring rod of one's excellence. Logic, is it, opened the way to reality which could not be reached without its help, even by the elite, much less the laity. So those who know, right, need to use logic to understand. Lay persons just can't do it. Philosophy has been attacked by different scholars from time to time, but nobody had undertaken a rational evaluation of logic before Ibn Taimiyah. So Dr. is going to explain and look at and evaluate logic. He was thus the first scholar to subject this branch of knowledge to a minute and critical study and express his independent opinion about it. First, he wrote a small treatise entitled Naqdul Mantiq. Mantiq is logic. And thereafter, another detailed dissertation under the title of Ar-Raddul al-Mantaqiyim. Mantaqiyim is also Mantiq here, in which he discussed logical propositions like pro-syllogism, that means those who are pro or moving on to ideas, finding two ideas to compare and to come to conclusions, major, minor, and middle terms, conclusions, etc., and showed their defects and limitations to demonstrate that the importance accorded to logic by the Muslim scholars was far in excess of its real worth. So he is going to bring about to explain why the logical thinking of the Greeks are just not worth it. Are actually, people have overemphasized it and honored these ideas given. The opinion of Ibn Taimiyah, it was neither the measuring rod of rationality nor its method of reasoning provided the surest way to attain credence, nor yet true knowledge. So he says that it is not a measuring rod of rationality, or nor its method of reasoning provided the surest way. Its method of reasoning, they have certain ways of reasoning things out. Right? He says it is not a foolproof way to attain to attain credence. That means to attain real understanding, not even true knowledge. He writes, the scholars claim that logic constitutes the criterion of discursive knowledge, which saves one from committing mistakes in the same way as the rules of meter and rhyme help in the lyrical composition or the etymology and syntax in the learning of a language, or else mechanical instruments is as in ascertaining the hours of the day. So he's saying that the scholars are saying that logic is critical, right, to constitute the criterion of discursive knowledge. So with logic, it is the main criteria of knowledge that is to be known, right, which saves one from committing mistakes in the same way. So if you do not know meter and rhyme, you cannot compose lyrics. If you don't know etymology and syntax, you cannot learn language. If you don't know grammar, you can't be good in your language. So likewise, you can't be able to understand real knowledge if you don't have logic. That's what we're saying. But this is not correct, for the knowledge is achieved through perception and rational faculty endowed to human beings by Allah. So this is not true, because whatever it is, whatever you try to think out, the knowledge is only achieved by perception and rational faculty, which Allah has given human beings. Its acquisition does not depend on the rules formulated by another person. To acquire knowledge, to be able to perceive things, to think rationally, right, are not dependent on the rules formulated by another person. One person might have a different way of thinking of certain things, another person have a different way of thinking of certain things, and it's not possible to acquire. It might be necessary to imitate the Arabs for learning Arabic language for the simple reason that it is a dialect of a nation which has to be heard and copied, but that cannot be true of discursive knowledge. This is learning Arabic, copying people and everything is fine, but not when you want to talk of real knowledge. The people before the inception of Greek logic possess knowledge about the reality of things. Likewise, there have been nations after it which have endeavored to reach the truth of the matter without taking its help. There are people who have learned the truth without even knowing Greek logic. Among every nation, one can find sages who reach the core of realities without learning Aristotelian logic. Little reflection by these people would convince them that they attain the knowledge possessed by them without recourse to this man-made science, that is logic. But they have, Allah has blessed them with lots of knowledge without knowing logic. All right, so that's explanation. We'll take a break here. Continue at 11:10. No, it's 11 o'clock. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We continue with our lesson with Omar Farouk.
And this is why, of all the things we do, the mosques we build, the schools we build, the books we write, the attempts we do, more of this is ta'lif. And this is why, of all the things we do, the mosques we build, the schools we build, the books we write, the attempts we do to make Islam known to ourselves and our people and to serve others, all the things that we do, the most important thing is the heart. And this is what you have to always pay attention to. And, look at your heart. Be aware of your heart. See how things register on your heart and judge yourself on that basis. This is really important because this is what it's about. And the more pure our hearts become, and the more filled with knowledge and light, then the more amazing will be the things that we do. Allah Azza wa Jal is the bestower of bounties. He is the one who is the giver of gifts. Everyone in this room, he gave the gift of existence. Do you realize how miraculous that is? Because almost no one does. That you exist among an infinite series of possibilities of other identities that could have been in that place instead of you. And you are not random. You are you. You are you. And you are the only you that could have ever been and that will ever be. And it's not just that you're a particular configuration, of atoms and molecules and cells who is given a certain name by a certain mother and father. No, that's not the reality. You are an identity, and no one before you or after you could ever have that identity. This is who you are, and this is your sir. This is your secret. And you want to realize that as fully during this short life as you possibly can. We ask Allah to wake us up. And we ask Him to let us get our hearts right and, to work together. But this is what's really important, And when we look at our hearts, among the most important thing is how do you look upon the gifts that are given? Okay, so mashallah, you are who you are. You may be handsome, you may be beautiful. You may be not as handsome as others, you may be not as beautiful as others. You may be very articulate, you may not be. You may be very good at cooking, you may be very good at building, you may be very good at teaching, you may be very good at electronics or at computers or medicine or whatever it is, but all of us have gifts. that are showered upon us, existence, life, consciousness, that are beyond words. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. As Allah says twice in the Quran, if you were to account the blessing of God, singular, doesn't say the blessings of God, one blessing of God, your existence, your eyesight, your consciousness. In fact, one of the great commentators, he says, when we talk about the ni'mah of God, the one, then we mean the Prophet Muhammad, because he is the greatest of all blessings. Can you imagine how great that blessing is? No, you can't. You will know someday. You will know someday. He is the blessing of blessings. But all of the blessings we have, they are innumerable. That's why it's very important to count your blessings. Aren't you alive? Don't you see? I know that you have 1,000 problems. And I know that some of you also have tragedies in your life. And sometimes you face difficulties that are a great pain to you. And they don't ever seem to go away. And they may seem to even get worse. And sometimes you wonder, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? Will I ever be out of this situation? And it seems like no. And all of us who've lived longer lives than some of the young people, we know that sometimes you get locked into a conflict or a tribulation, might go on for 8 years, might go on for longer. And it's like, there's no way out of this. When will there ever be a way out of this? Just have to be patient, okay? And then it's over, and it's almost as if it didn't happen. You walk away from it, and maybe you forget it. So we all have to count our blessings. But one of the most important things for the heart is that ability to count blessings. And you had things, maybe they were taken away. You had wonderful experience, or maybe you didn't have wonderful experiences. You still have so many blessings that if you were to count them, you would not be able to do that at all. They are too great. Did you know that among the blessings you have, وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ, and he gave you of everything that you asked for. What did you ask for? The things you asked for. Everything Allah asked for, he gave you something of that. And asking is not just by the tongue. Asking is also by I want, I need. I want an education, and maybe you got one. I want to get married, and maybe you got married. And if you didn't, maybe you will. Okay, he gave you everything that you asked. And again, one of the subtleties of Arabic, and the Sahaba understood this very well, is that this has in it ellipsis. And it has in it, he gave you everything that you asked and everything you didn't ask. That's ellipsis. وَمَا لَمْ تَسْأَلُوا. The Sahaba understood that because they knew the Arabic language. It's got this incredible power of ellipsis. Did you ask for the sun? Did you ask for the moon? Ever? Did you ask for the rain? Did you ask for, springtime? Did you ask for flowers to bloom in the spring? And everything about this world around you is finely tuned for you, not for anyone else. The distance between the earth and the moon is so precise. It's like it couldn't be a hair's width more exact. And if it were not, things would be different. In the world of atoms, the protons and the electrons have to be perfectly balanced. And they can be a little bit out of balance. The electrons, negative charge, and the protons, positive charge, they've got to be almost identical. They can be a little bit off. How much? 1 part to 100 billion parts. If any of these atoms didn't have that fine, perfect tuning, what would happen? It would explode. If the atoms here got off just 1 part to 100 billion parts, this would all blow up like an atom bomb. And who's that for? For you. This world was created for you to live in it. And whether you know it or not, you are the center. No matter how much you think of yourself or how much you don't think of yourself, you are the center. So these are all blessings for you. The trees are for you. The birds are for you. The sun is for you. The stars are for you. Imam al-Ghazali talks about that in The Marvels of the Heart.
Right, that's short one. Alhamdulillah. Continue with our al-Wafi. Right, we were at this very long hadith and hadith 19 and Allah Ta'ala wa hifdhuhu wa nasruhu wa ta'yiduhu. Aunullahi Ta'ala wa hifdhuhu wa nasruhu wa ta'yiduhu. An Abil Abbas Abdullah ibn Abbas radhiyallahu anhu qala kuntu khalfan nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam yawman فقال يا غلام إني أعلمك كلمات احفظ الله يحفظك احفظ الله تجده تجاهك إذا سألت فاسأل الله وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله واعلم أن الأمة لو اجتمعت على أن ينفعك بشيء لم ينفعك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله لك وإن اجتمعوا على أن يضرك بشيء لم يضرك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله عليك رفعت الأقلام وجفت الصحف رواه الترمذي وقال حديث الحسن صحيح وفي رواه الغير الترمذي احفظ الله تجده أمامك تعرف إلى الله في الرخاء يعرفك في الشدة واعلم أن ما أخطأك لم يكن ليصيبك وما أصابك لم يكن ليخطئك واعلم أن النصر مع الصبر وأن الفرج مع الكرب وأن مع العسر يسرا. So this hadith, first hadith, and the second variation of the hadith, right? There's a gist of the meaning of the hadith. Allah, the exalted help, protection, assistance and support. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, so the topic of the hadith is Allah's help, protection, assistance, and support. Rasulullah SAW advised Abdullah ibn Abbas to be mindful of Allah and Allah will be mindful of him. So this is a gist of the meaning of the hadith. I'm not going through the whole hadith. To ask and seek help from Allah, none can benefit or harm if Allah does not will. Allah, all has been decreed. Remember Allah in times of ease and He will remember us in times of difficulties. Rasulullah SAW was keen to plant sound creed in the souls of the believers and especially the youth. So this is hadith shows that Rasulullah wants Ibn Abbas to understand. Ibn Abbas is his cousin. Muslims must be brave and not fear anything when they have strong faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be truthful and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah approached the boy with care, so he is all ears. So not the way he calls the boy, the way he explains things to the boy, right? Is loving and caring. His mind is focused and his heart is first. Very important that you want to explain to a child. The child is focused on what you are saying and his heart is present and he is eager to learn from you. These words refine one's thinking, sharpens one's eyes, illuminate one's intellect, firmly establish one's creed and strengthen one's certainty. So this is this hadith will help us to refine our thinking, help us to sharpen our mind, illuminate our intellect, and firmly establish our beliefs, our creed, and strengthens our certainty. Allah preserves our religion, protects our creed, protects us from the anxieties of the soul and this filth of misguidance, protects us from the evils of creation. Allah helps those with taqwa and strive for excellence. Young men with taqwa will be under the shade of Arash. So Rasulullah wants to instill this taqwa in his cousin. He's very young at that time, his cousin, and he explains to him the hadith. To continue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exalted assistance and support. If someone is mindful of Allah, the exalted subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is with him. So you need to always be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is with you, helping him and assisting him, protecting him and supporting him, granting him success, and showing him the right way whenever he is in darkness or anguish. Wherever we are, in whatever state we are, we need to always turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always in constant remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always aware of the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is said, I'm not sure whether it's a hadith or not, that the best way to remove depression and unhappiness is to say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power and there is no might except with Allah. Because once you have strongly hold on to that, then we would know Allah is always there for us. Even if things that seem to be happening the way you don't want it to happen, or is something unlike, something you don't like, but always remember in the wisdom and the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think good of Allah and things will go well with you, inshallah. Be mindful of Allah, you'll find him in front of you. You will find him with you, guarding and protecting, assisting and supporting. You need to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you do things right for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah will be there for you. Have trust, complete trust, and Allah will be there for you, and he will assist you and he will support. Sometimes the help might come a bit later, but it will be there. And that's Rasulullah 13 years, right, of being exploited, of being abused, of being tortured, the Muslims and early Muslims in Mecca, right? But they have full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much. So when the Sahaba, we have the incident when the Sahabas with Rasulullah in the shade of the Kaaba, they were just sitting down there and they were complaining to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, we are being tortured, we are being, humiliated by these kuffars, by these disbelievers. Why don't you just do to Allah to destroy all these people? And Rasulullah said, I'm sent here as a mercy to mankind. Anyway, he says, people of old, people of the Bani Israel, they were sawn into two for their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is that? We just go on, we just move on, and Allah will be there for us. Inna Allaha ma'alladhina taqaw walladhina hum muhsinun. Surely Allah is with those who have taqwa and those who are muhsin. So two groups of people, right? Those of taqwa and those who strives for excellence. Taqwa is a person who's always conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever state. A person who is a muhsin, right? It said those with taqwa, right, is in the verb form here, taqwa here. So there are times where you actually lapses. But muhsin is in ism, is a noun form. It is at all time being a muhsin. A muhsin, one who is a muhsin is a muttaqin and also a sabirun. Two qualities of a muhsin is that they have taqwa and they are patient. They hold themselves very well and they work hard to achieve, to be the best, right, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is with those who have taqwa of him and with those who excel. Surah An-Nahl, verse 120. Qatada said, whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah is with him. Whoever Allah is with has a platoon with him, and that will never be defeated. A guide who never sleeps and a guide who never leads astray. So that is the reality of being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why Nabi Musa alayhi salam, when he was chased, when he reached the edge of the water and he saw the army of Fir'aun advancing towards him, right? He says, Inna ma'iya rabba, surely with me is my Rabb, Inna ma'iya rabba sayahdin, and he will guide him. There's no worries at all, no fears at all, because he knew Allah was with him and he knew Allah would guide him. And that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to strike the water, and the water splits. Right? They said it splits into 12 parts for the 12 tribes of Bani Israel. So interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually knew the Bani Israel's not very, it's going to be difficult for them to cross if everybody is to cross one shot in one path. So let them be divided into their stripes, and it's easier that way. And no quarrels, no wrangling. However, Allah, the Exalted's help and support are connected to carrying out His commands and avoiding what He has prohibited. Whoever obeys Allah, the Exalted, He will assist and support him. Whoever disobeys Him, He will forsake and humiliate him. It is a reality. You have to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, always obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah, help and support will come our way. In tansurullaha yansurukum. If you help Allah, Allah will help you. وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ, and He will make firm your foothold. If you help Allah, He will help you and make your feet firm. Muhammad, verse 7. If Allah helps you, then you will not be defeated. وَإِن يَخْذُلْكُمْ فَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْصُرُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. If Allah helps you, no one can defeat you. If He forsakes you, who can help you after that? It's a question. Allah, only Allah can. Right? You help Allah, that means you do what Allah wants you to do. You help the slaves of Allah who are in need, and Allah will help you. Now, no worries about that. No one can ever defeat you. And if He forsakes you, that's it. You are in for it. And nobody at all to help you, because none can help but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For youth before your youth before your old age. Whoever is mindful of Allah when he is young and strong, Allah the Exalted, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will be mindful of him when he's old and weak. In your times of ease, you remember Allah. In times of difficulty, Allah will remember you. When you're young and strong, you can do lots of things, but you're always in a state of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're old and you can't do much, He will be there for you. He will grant him hearing, sight, and intellect, and give him a noble station in the day of standing. Young people who is always have Allah in their minds, right? Allah will bless him with sight, hearing, sight, and intellect. And he will be blessed with a station in the day of standing, noble station in the day of standing. He will shade him with the shade of his throne when there is no shade by his shade. As is established in the two sides collection, there are 7 whom Allah will shade on the day when there is no shade but his shade. Just ruler, the youth who grows up worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, these are 7 people will be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 2 of them is the just ruler. The other one is a youth who grows up worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not many youngsters out there are able to be in a state of constant remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having their 5 prayers a day. But those who do, and they do it till the end of their lives, to the old age, they're special. So Allah is aware that the trials, the passion, the desires of the young, very strong. And if they are able to subdue the desires and their passion because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they'll be very, very handsomely rewarded. Perhaps there's a secret behind him giving this advice to his cousin. Was a young boy at the beginning of his life, so that he would take advantage of his youth and his vitality. This boy, remember, is a ghulam. Ghulam is about 8, 9, or 10 years old, right? And this is the age where we are supposed to train our children to have strong belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to discipline them, right, with doing acts of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to understand these various acts of worship, right, and to live life for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah spoke a truth when he said, take advantage of 5 before 5, your youth before your old age. Right, there's 5 of them, and he says more of that, 5, right? So the first one of them is your youth before your old age. And when you're young, right, you're able to do lots, do as much as you can. When you're old, it's not going to be. Some people, when they are young, they say, oh, never mind, I have to pray 5 times a day. I'm going to pray my sunat prayers. I'm going to read the Quran. But when you're old, your legs start to creak, your body start to creak. To even do your sunnah prayers, wajib prayers, it is so difficult to sit on a chair, cannot pray properly. So take advantage of your youth before your old age. This is especially the case when the youth are the hope of the ummah. When you build your youth well, right, the ummah will be strong. They're the ones who will carry the call of truth and justice, while the people of evil and falsehood strive to tempt them and entice them. That is, they are to carry the call of truth. They must believe in the truth, and they must want to uphold the truth, right, and be just and fair. Although lots of people out there who are evil and false will strive to tempt them and entice them away from the truth. Yeah, so much so that we have lots of, in this world of gadgets, youngsters are so exposed to all kinds of gadgets in their hands that they get lost in those gadgets and forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a challenge for those who are trying to bring people back to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They therefore desperately need more attention and instruction so that they can be firm in the face of these devils, whether human or jinn. They need to fight the jinn, human, or the human jinn, the jinn and the human. Allah's exalted, grateful slaves are the people who receive help and support from Him. So, the believer who wins Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's protection, support, and providence is the grateful slave, who comprehends Allah's favor and thus knows Him as he should be known. So these are the people who are grateful, who are always obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we disobey Allah even a second, we are not grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has given us lot, so we must be grateful to Him. He obeys His commands, avoids what He has prohibited, maintains His limits, and observes His rights. We know He learns. You must learn before you can do all these things. You must have knowledge, right? Then you will know what are the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what are the limits set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which you don't want to trample on. He enjoys immense blessings while temptations surround him and passions contend with him, but he rebels against them and turns away from them. So there's lots of, as a young person, woman, play, and lots of earning lots of money and things like this. All temptations around him, right? But he is strong. He rebels. He fights against them, and he turns away from them. He turns to Allah and uses these blessings to please Him, and he seeks refuge in Him to protect him from slipping. Always seeking help of Allah, so you don't move away from Islam. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. It's always turning to Allah, and he uses the blessings of Allah to please Him, to always respond to Him. Allah inspires him to show more gratitude so that he can continue to receive His favor, while he declares his poverty before the rich beyond need. So Allah inspires this person to show more gratitude. The more you ask, the more grateful you are, the more you get. That's what Allah says. So that he can continue to receive His favor, while he declares his poverty before the rich beyond need. So he is only turning to Allah. He only complains to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rich beyond need, the wise, certain that all favor is in Allah's hand. So Allah is rich, He doesn't need any of us. And He is all wise, so He has no need of us. We need Him, right? He is all wise. Always remember, Allah is all wise. Whatever happens is of the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are certain that all the favors is in Allah's hands. Allah's hand. He gives it to whomever He wants. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. And what is with you of favors is from Allah. We must also remember everything that we have are of favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we must be continuously grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This special knowledge of Allah is what brings the slave closer to His Rabb. So we need to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to realize that Allah bless us with blessings, and we need to be always be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's love is drawn to his slave who strives for him. So you work hard for Allah, then Allah, the love will come to them, to you. The love of Allah will come to you. He answers his supplication, he gives what he asks for. So Allah is the one. We make our du'as, Allah will answer. Is remember, the way Allah answers is not that He might get whatever you want, because you must be aware and believe that we as human beings are not exactly wise, right? And of course, Allah is all wise and Allah does things, right, out of His wisdom. So sometimes He gives whatever you ask for. No, He doesn't. He gives him what he will ask for. So he says all the time. He saves him from nuisance that disturbs his livelihood. And he protects him from anything frightful that threatens his safety. Get to know Allah in times of ease, and He will know you in times of adversity. So when you're always turning to Allah, He will protect you from anything that is frightful, that threatens your safety. At-Tirmidhi has rated that Rasulullah said, whoever is pleased that Allah answers his supplication in times of adversity, then he make abundant supplication in times of ease. But it is about remembering Allah when things are good. A lot of people, when things are good, their life is good, they actually forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's very important that we always keep on remembering Allah. If we are Allah did mention in the Quran about people who are in big trouble, right? At sea usually, right? Things were rocking away, they were almost drowning, and they sought help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and promised all kinds of things. And Allah saved them, but then they turn against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the nature of human beings. They forget what Allah has given them. It is regarding the like of this slave that Allah says in the hadith Qudsi, if he asks me, I give him, and if he seeks refuge in me, I grant him refuge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there for us because we turn to Him at all times. Turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and supplication. This is one of the message that Rasulullah gave his cousin, right? Turn to Allah and for help and supplication. Rasulullah is instructing his cousin, follow his path to call on Allah. Is He the Most High, the All Powerful, always and forever, and asking for something and when seeking refuge and support. So when we ask for help, ask for Allah. So He is the only one who can help us. None can help us. He's the Most High, the Most Powerful, right? And we call people to Allah. We seek protection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and support with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He should not ask anyone else or seek help from anyone else. Likewise, his supplication and his gratitude should only be for Him. Forgiveness should not only be sought from Him, and he should bow or prostrate before anyone, should not bow or prostrate before anyone else. So he should not be asking for anyone else. He shouldn't seek help from anyone else. And whatever dua and gratitude only for Allah. Right? We should ask Allah to forgive us, and should not bow or prostrate to anyone. When you ask Allah. When you seek help, seek help. This is the portion of the hadith being repeated to explain why these opinions, these lessons are being mentioned. Al-Bukhari and Muslim have related that Rasulullah said, Allah says, is there a caller so that I can answer his call? Is there an asker so I can give him what he asks? Is there a seeker of forgiveness so that I can forgive him? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always waiting for us to seek his forgiveness. Supplication is for the one who is close and quick to respond. Supplication is only directed towards Allah because He alone, the exalted says, because He alone can give you whatever you want. Not if He wishes to. Again. Ud'uni astajib lakum. Call me and I will respond to you. Allah praises His believing servants because they supplicate to Him and ask of Him. So those who need Allah, shows their need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, always making du'as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will answer his prayers and also praise Him, right? Because he is dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إنهم كانوا يسارعون في الخيرات ويدعوننا رغبا ورهبا ورغبا ورهبا وكانوا لنا خاشعين. They outdid one another in good actions. They race against one another in good actions, calling out to us in yearning and in awe, and humbling themselves to us. Now, so Allah, these people, Allah described them. They are the ones who rush to do good acts, right? And they call on Allah, really yearning. Gharaba is to yearn, to turn to Him, and in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yearning, and Allah blesses them and accepts them, right? And they humble themselves to Allah subhanahu, humble themselves. They pray to Allah subhanahu, because He subhanahu wa ta'ala is close to His slaves. He hears their supplications and answers their requests. He knows the reality of your desires and of your wishes. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي قَرِيبٌ فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُحِبُّ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِلَى إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّكُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. If my slave asks you about me, I'm me. Answer the caller when he calls on me. They should therefore respond to me and believe in me, so that hopefully they will be rightly guided. So it's important is to respond to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah calls on and asks us to do things, then we need to do things right. Follow Him, obey Him, and call on Him, dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Respond to Him and must believe in Him, so that they will be rightly guided. It's very important if we are rightly guided, inshallah. When you are rightly guided, you will be people of Jannah. All right, so we'll stop here. Fussilat. Continue with the fussilat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Verse 8 to 11. Allah turned to the heavens. We're talking about the creation of the heavens and the earth, right? And it was smoke. He said to it and to the earth, come both willingly or unwillingly. They both said, become as those will. So this is the event that occurred when Allah created the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth came willingly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقَضَاهُنَّ. Then He decreed them sab'a samawat, 7 skies, fi yawmaini, in 2 days. وَأَوْحَى, and He inspired fi kulli sama, in each sky, its affairs, amrah. وَزَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِهَا وَحِفْظًا, with lamps and a guard. وَزَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِهَا وَحِفْظًا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. That is a decree of the Aziz, mighty, and Alim. Alright, so after Allah, faqadahunna. So the hunna is the smoke, right? Sab'a samawat, 7 skies. Fi yawmain. So in 2 days, He created the 7 skies. Although Allah Almighty was able to create everything at a single instant, but it was because of His omniscience that He created the heavens in 2 stages. See that some of the scholars do not use 2 days, although the Arabic word is 2 days, but they say that it actually is 2 stages. Allahu alam bisawab. But even with 2 days, it's no big deal for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In terms of divine omnipotence, there is no difference in the creation of the earth or that of the 7 heavens, as He created them in 2 stages, right? So that's the creation of the heavens and the earth. وَأَوْحَى فِي كُلِّ سَمَاءٍ أَمْرَهَا. And we revealed to every sky, right, her command. The decree was acted upon throughout the 7 heavens in 2 days. And the decree of each heaven was divinely revealed unto. So all the heavens are informed of what they were supposed to do, and they were aware of it. This is their duties. Each heaven is inclined by nature to act upon its existential command as per divine omniscience and the order of the world. So that is the sun, sky. وَزَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيهَا وَحِفْظًا. And Allah says, Allah decorated, right, the sky of the earth with light, with a lamp and God. The word sama derived from the word samud, designates high. And it refers to the atmosphere encompassing celestial bodies. The lights of the heavens are the moon, the sun, the moon, and all the stars and the planets. They are likened to lights owing to their brilliance and giving of light unto the earth day and night. Specifications of light in the sky of the world indicates that all the planets and stars visible in the sky are those belonging to the sky of their own world, which is lower than all the planets. Since the word dunya derives from the danu, above, which lie above heavens. All right, so the lamps, I'll put lamps and gods, right? Lamps to create, to create beauty. So it's decorated, like he puts lights all over. The stars are beautiful, the moon is beautiful, right? The planets are also beautiful. Allah strongly protected the lower sky from the incursions of the devils. All these tasks were accomplished in 2 days, and the sum total of all these days came out to be 6. Thus, these verses explains the detail of what is stated at other places in the Quran, that it took Allah 6 days to create the sky and the earth. ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. That is the power of the Aziz and Alim. Whoever reflects, so this summarizes all these details. Whoever reflects on this great universe will conclude that it has been created by the planning of an all-powerful and all-knowing. Right? By looking at the universe itself, we know that there is a creator, definitely. And created by the planning of, he's definitely powerful to be able to create all these things, and he definitely knows, right, how to create all these things, plants and animals. It's not come into being accidentally. It has great wisdom in its planning. And this planning is from being one who is powerful and dominant over everything. Nothing is beyond his authority. So we are aware that this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is powerful and dominant, and nothing is beyond his authority. At the same time, his knowledge is all embracing. So Allah is powerful, he can do anything, he can give honor to anyone. But the meaning Izzah also has meaning of honor, he is able to do whatever. Each and everything in the farthest corners of the universe is also in his knowledge. So also aware of the needs of each and everything, and also cognizant of the role they have in the collective system of this universe. If this summary is kept in mind together with the question posed initially, right, then the whole discussion would be قُلْ أَإِنَّكُمْ, is it you? أَإِنَّكُمْ لَتَكْفُرُونَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَ الْأَرْضَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ. Is it that you are denying the one who he created the skies in 2 days? This universe, a virtue of its very existence, bears testimony that it has been made by an all-powerful and all-knowing God and is under his control. However, such is your ignorance that by setting up many hypothetical deities as his partners, you are rejecting. Right. قُلْ أَإِنَّكُمْ لَتَكْفُرُونَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَ الْأَرْضَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ. So Allah says, do you disbelieve in the one who created the heavens in 2 days? The statement is given in the form of a question to express wonder and disgust. What is implied or is implied is that there is no justification for such foolishness. However, when people lose their senses, they know then no act of foolishness is beyond. So it's when you don't think properly, you don't believe in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't study the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't acknowledge the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have lost your senses. This is what happens to the philosophers and the dialecticians. Because they try to deny the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once you deny the attributes of Allah, like this one, the two attributes we have here is Aziz, almighty and all powerful, who can do anything to destroy, but at the same time, he gives honor and nobility to people. And then the next is and people lose their senses, then no act of foolishness. That means they just lost themselves, they don't know think properly, they always think irrationally, or there are people who are supposed to be rational, but they will act foolishly because they've got no guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing evident from these verses is that this world has been created very gradually and with great wisdom according to a specific plan. It is wrong to believe that it was created merely for entertainment without any purpose and will continue to end like this. Some people think this world as a place of entertainment, even they're so old, they find they need to be entertained all the time, right? Even at the lessons, they want to be entertained by lessons, they don't understand the importance of seeking knowledge, right, and practicing the acts in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is why from a very young age, we need to make them understand the value of the world. This elaborate arrangement is an indubitable testimony to it being created with a purpose. And if it has a purpose to it, then this entails the day of judgment has to come. So if the world has a purpose, what is the purpose of the creating of the world? And there must be accountability. So how to have accountability? Then there will be resurrection and Allah will judge us. Secondly, its creator has immeasurable power and infinite knowledge. Hence, for the stars of creation, neither did he require anyone's help, nor is anyone capable enough to. Allah says, He alone created everything. None creates but Him, right? And the power is infinite, is immeasurable, right? This is something which is beyond the understanding of human beings to have immeasurable power and infinite knowledge. Thirdly, the sky and the earth are like a building in which Allah has placed man. Hence, this notion is self-evidently wrong that two different things control its roof and floor. The earth and the land, all is under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah controls everything. On the contrary, the harmony found between the sky and the earth bears witness that all-powerful and all-knowing God who created them is also controlling them under. So this is how we come around concluding that Allah is the most powerful. That's why when we were talking about, Taimiyah was talking about the dialecticians and the philosophers and comparing the ideas to the Quran. Here we see the Quran, right, giving us reasons why Allah is the all-powerful and all-knowing God. He created the heavens and the earth and the skies and everything, right, alone. Fourthly, the all-embracing system of providence found in this world bears testament that is created by the powerful and knowing God. No one else is capable of setting up such a system. Allah provides all. It's just immense provision. The animals, the plants, all need sustenance to sustain the stars and the heavens, as we heard Omar Farooq say. It is to the precise, the distance between the earth and the moon and the earth and the sun is so precise, even not a single point, 0.00 cannot, or else the whole world will be in disarray. Right? The rotation of the moon is precise speed, or else the moon will go off tangent. The earth, the sun, everything is precise. No one is capable of doing such a thing except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For this reason, his servant should not plead and implore him because should only plead and implore him because he is the real being who can harm and benefit others. He's the only one who can cause harm and benefit to us. Is Allah. We are slaves of Allah. We believe in His might and power. It is why Rasulullah told his cousin, only ask from Allah and no one else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fifthly, this wide system of providence entails that a day come in which people come before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has in fact blessed them with favors and be held accountable for them. Those who recognize the obligations they owe to these favors should be rewarded, and those who adopted an ungrateful attitude be punished for this behavior. All right, we'll stop here. Allahumma anta rabbi la ilaha illa anta khalaqtani wa ana abduka wa ana ala ahdika wa wa'dika mastata'tu a'udzu bika min syarri ma sana'tu abu'u laka bi ni'matika alayya wa abu'u bi dhanbi faghfir li innahu la yaghfiru dzunuba illa anta. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbana anfa'na bima 'allamtana. Rabbi 'allimna alladhi yanfa'una. Rabbi faqihna wa faqih ahlana wa qarabatil lana fi dinina. مع أهل القتر أنثى وذكر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلى الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.